Welcome to the CDO Magazine's Women History Month series. I'm Asha Saxena, CEO of Women Leaders in Data and AI, where leaders come together advancing the mission to create a fair digital world with parity and equity. Today, I'm honored to have Besa Bauta, a dear friend, but also a CIO at Jewish Board of Family and Children's Services. She served in the C-suite role for many different industries in healthcare and for the federal and public sector. But today she's here to celebrate Women's History Month with us. Women's History Month is such a special month, Base, I feel, is a time when we truly pay the tribute to the women who came before us and the inspiring women who are around us and we are surrounded by them, and also for the women who are going to come in the future. So I do believe that this is the month for us to take a pause and take a moment to celebrate the women who are in our life, who've been there before, and who are coming in the future. So first of all, I want to say happy World's Women History Month to you. And I'm so proud, Besa, to know you and call you a dear friend. So happy to celebrate this month with you.
I'm so excited to be here. Before I was mentioning that, I mean, for women, we've done so much for the world. We're doing so much that 1 month is not enough. I think we need to be celebrated 12 months of the year. But it's kind of nice being kind of highlighted and kind of reflect that period. And, as you mentioned, it's important to sort of reflect what we have done, what we have brought to the world, whose coattails we have followed, and who's following and looking up like the next generations as far as what we're doing in the road that we're paving for the future.
So well said. And I think, the fact that we're taking the moment to talk about women in science, women in technology, and especially in the age of AI, the fact that women are having their voice heard, taking the stage to be able to talk about it is really critical. You are in the role of CIO, and you've served as a chief information technology, data analytics, AI officer in multiple industries and different sizes of the company, and led large teams and innovation. But when you see, I mean, listen, 2023 was the age of generative AI, the large language models. Not that we have never heard about the AI before. We worked with the mathematical model, and now we're working with the large language models. So as a CIO, how do you see your role evolved or changed? And how does the AI becomes a critical part of your strategy, being the chief information officer for a large company?
So I've served as a chief data officer for almost, a decade prior to taking the CIO role. And I think before with the CDAO role, I was kind of limited to just the data and analytics, which really didn't give me enough power and control over the entire technology stack and infrastructure. I think in my current role, I kind of have a swath of downstream as well as upstream. So I have greater control regarding what I could do. In my current role as a CIO, I was able to deploy the Microsoft Copilot. So it's the generative AI application that obviously Microsoft did a pretty good investment with OpenAI. We could talk about, closed models, open models, and all that means, but for me and for my organization, it was important because obviously Office 365 is ubiquitous to every single organization as far as how we work. Email is kind of ingrained or any of those communications channels. So how can you bring in AI to make it really practical for the workforce? And I think that's where these generative models, as well as chat applications, as long as they're embedded within the ecosystem to free up time, to allow individuals to do their job, better, faster, with, greater ease. So then they could devote that time to something else. I think that's where it's going to be the greatest value. I mean, that's what I see. And I see even with our staff, they're excited, like, what does this AI really mean? And it's similar to, I say in your phone, you have, like a GPS navigator. Before we used to use maps, now we use a navigator. It becomes part and parcel of the way you do things. So it's just another tool in the toolbox to make our lives depends on how you look at it, either faster, easier, or just more annoying, pick your choice.
I love that this is a tool in your back pocket to use. Just like other tools we've had in the past, right? The evolution of technology from the light bulb to, having a calculator to Excel, which people got so dependent on. It's another tool for us to be more productive and efficient. But there's also a fear, right? There's a lot of people who have been talking about, oh my God, what it can do to hurt you, and all the challenges around AI, the digital twin. And I was talking to a creative director yesterday, and they were saying that not only that we can create a digital twin of you, but also record your voice, and they can record the whole session with your voice on it. And as I was listening to it, and I said, maybe I'm going to pause and not use that, because right now I want to use my own voice. I don't know how this will be used. So there is truly a fear around what AI can do and how it can hurt, or people can abuse this technology. But you and I are optimists, and we spoke about this before, that there's always good and bad with every technology. Anything you do with science, there can be, if it's a biological, chemical, nuclear, there's good and bad. It depends upon the person who's using it, and that's why the ethical and responsible AI plays a really, really critical part. But before I talk about that, I do want to talk about the whole natural language processing that has been evolving. The chatbots in the past were annoying, and now we have chatbots who are intelligent enough to be able to give you options and upsell, and really be able to have a complicated, sophisticated conversation. How optimist are you about natural language processing, which is using the large language model to be able to converse either as a customer service rep within your organization, or how comfortable you are to recommend that to your business users to use natural language processing for specific use cases? And what are the best use cases you've seen personally?
I mean, I think with LLMs, like as with any other tools, is how it's implemented within the organization, what is the intended use. Um, as I mentioned before, I kind of mentioned Copilot, and I like to know where my sources are coming, because you just want to minimize, the error rate regarding what's being spewed back at you. But humans make errors all the time, and errors in judgment, and confabulate a lot of things and hallucinate. I mean, we use that term all the time. So I think it's analogous in a lot of ways. What's really interesting is that as these models sort of expand, obviously complexity creates new design elements, new ways of being. So as the language models expand, as the compute power expands, as the complexity expands, you have different types of formulations that are coming to the fore that were never originally intended in the original design. So it's definitely interesting to see how this technology is going to evolve in the future. I was listening to a podcast, I think yesterday or the day before, as far as large language models. And I think you talked about, likeness and image, and, where is this going to go next? I think right now we have sort of an interface where you're chatting, but I think down the line, you're going to have interfaces where it's not just a text box. It's going to be almost like a digital human interaction. So it's going to be a likeness. And the podcast was really interesting because it was talking about somebody who had lost, I believe, their mother. And what he had done is that he had taken a language model, had taken a recording of her, pictures of her, and in a way trained this language model to create an image of their mother so he could interact and kind of grieve post loss. And I thought that was a really interesting sort of, use of large language models. In a way, he was recreating. So there was a lot of, when you talk about ethical, issues, is that ethical? I mean, there's privacy, confidentiality. What does it mean to create the likeness of somebody that you've lost? Kind of regenerate that in a large language model, a chatbot, where you could have communication with your past, mom. And I thought it was fascinating that, sort of like, as you mentioned, taking your voice, your likeness. So, and this chatbot, I mean, in this podcast, it was interesting because he was basically, what he was saying is that it was a way for him to, he knew that it wasn't his mother, but there's so much to that was real to him. And I think the scary part of that is that the realness when you're having a conversation is that you anthropomorphize this application. In a way, you forget that it's an application, but you expound human elements to this. And that's exactly what he was doing. He was expounding human elements to this application. He's like, in the back of my mind, I knew it was not my mother, but when I was communicating, the chatbot would say to him, good morning. I don't know I can remember what his name was. Let's say it was Sam's. Like, how are you feeling today? Make sure you get, you go out, you exercise, make sure you have your breakfast. And for him, it was reassuring. So I think we're just scratching the surface regarding where this is going to go. Like you said, Asha, I'm an optimist. I always look at the positive side, sometimes at the chagrin of my family, but you have to. And I think with these tools, like any other tools, it's really the use of how do these get applied and how they get used.
It's funny. There was a study done, and it was on NPR. They were talking about the optimists land up living. They were saying about 20 or 25% longer than the people who are pessimists. So there is definitely an advantage to being an optimist for sure. And there was another, as you were talking about this podcast, it reminded me of this episode I saw on 60 Minutes. It had a story about USC having this a lab where they have Holocaust survivor stories. So they actually use large language models to have this image that comes up, looks real, of these people who are not, they're deceased, but they're telling you the story. So they go back into these, large databases to really pull up, stories. And then people were asking them questions. And the image, the 3D image, or, was talking back and giving answers. So it was a great way to learn about history. So you could use these, digital humans or twins of historical figures telling you stories. Think about if a kid wants to learn about, Civil War, or American, or French Revolution, could hear from the real characters about how and what happened during that time. So it's just a great way of learning, a new way of learning, interactive way of learning.
It humanizes, sort of that experience, but I think a lot of the younger generations will have sort of immersive experiences, even with like virtual reality or 3D. You're able to enter a scene and it becomes really real, like Star Trek. Who thought that fantasy, becomes reality fairly soon? So I think it's because I see that sort of transition from, watching Star Trek as a kid, and I'm like, oh my God, look, there's a food simulator, a 3D printer of food, and now they're actually testing that. Scary, in a way, but exciting in another way. And then next thing you're gonna see is sort of like 3D immersion experiences that are super real, where history comes alive. Then you have these individuals talking to you and telling a history through stories. And I think that makes history much more relatable to students as a form of learning. So it's sort of a visual, auditory, spatial, 3D way of learning, which is definitely much more immersive than, sitting at a desk and somebody telling you, well, this is how the history was. I think I probably would have paid way more attention back then than when I was younger.
So this is all interesting. All these use cases are really interesting. But there was also this whole report on that you could have your son or child call you on the phone and ask you to give them money, and you have to be
Yeah.
careful about, because now they can imitate the behavior of the human, whatever relationship you have with your near and dear one. So be careful. So I think the security and privacy now goes to a next level. Even though we are technologists and we do promote business users to use technology, it becomes really critical for data and AI users to be very, very conscious about the security and privacy. And you are working with healthcare, and before that you were working with the public data. So talk to us a little bit about what should these leaders be thinking about when they're thinking about security and privacy around the data?
So I'll start with sort of, kids calling and asking for money. I usually say no. You have to set a justification before you're going to get anything. So
Back.
automatically, no, justification fails, then I know you're fake.
Right.
And my kids know, my automatic response is hell no. So if somebody's like, what, and then I'm like, next step would be provide a justification. I don't think any algorithm can, breach that. But I think these models are becoming much more sophisticated. What about it comes back with an awesome rationalization that I'm stumped? In that case, they could have my money. But I agree with you. I think the privacy, the confidentiality is really, really important. And ensuring that we're putting guardrails so how this information gets used. So the information doesn't end up in the hands of bad actors. Any technology, as you mentioned, nuclear, quantum can be used for nefarious purposes or great purposes. So what I worry about is that government rules, regulations, guidelines are usually lacking. Technology kind of, runs at a fast speed, and then everything else needs to catch up. You see those sprinters where like the first one is like 30 miles ahead or whatever, 20 yards. And then everybody else in the back, I'm usually the slow one going, wait a minute, wait, make sure there's like a huge hole to avoid. But I think for us, it's going to be important and for government entities to put laws, regulations, and really think about the technologies that are coming to the fore right now, which are slightly different. I think during the Industrial Revolution, it's interesting when I was looking online, they were having similar conversation as today. And I was looking at sort of development of my washing machine broke. So I'm like, who actually developed the washing machine? And then there was a fear during the turn of the century is like, oh my God, if these women have a washing machine, then I mean, what are they going to do with all their time, So in a way, it took away that level of effort for women. So they become much more efficient. And then there was a fear about how do these technologies, these industrial mechanic systems work? Are they going to replace individuals? Are they going to replace jobs? And what are the ethics around each of those things? So I think for us is just another process as far as moving to society 5.0 or whatever the next step is in the evolution of society and humanity. So for us, it's really important to think about what does privacy mean? I think some of our privacy regulations were done in the 60s and 70s. It no longer applies in 2024. So we need to update some of those original privacy laws and regulations. And then kind of amend a lot of the laws, regulations, guidelines to reflect current technologies and current needs, and also plan for the future. And that's really hard to do because you don't know what the future will look like. How do you envision? So that's where I think some of the futurists can come into play and say, this is what we think it will be, but you don't really know.
And I think that's why it's so important, Besa, that as we start evolving and we have these technologies going to make our life easier and we're going to spend less time on manual work or, work which is just a repetition of task, we will have more time to be more creative, be more innovative. And how do we use that time to be productive and not hurtful? How do we use that time to be more responsible and ethical and not, create things which are going to hurt humankind? So I think the science and technology is giving us space. Science and technology is giving us space to evolve as human beings and be more productive. More and more humans will now be able to come up to the level where we are being strategic. There were only certain percentage of people who were being strategic in their job. Now more and more employees and at different levels will become strategic because they have time to invest in being strategic. So I do feel it's a good time. Technology is evolving really fast. From, we talk about AGI and people worry about AGI or ASI. It is going to evolve, but how do we engage to make sure we continue being involved? And that's where it comes, right? That diversity becomes so important. Having women in the field of data and AI is only going to help how we create our platform. What role do you see diversity, equity, and women being at the spot where they're being strategic will become more important?
I think humanizing the data and sort of having representative images or digital twin images of us is going to be very important because you want to have the entire quilt and carpet of human society represented in a digital form. And if you don't have that, then you have a myopic vision of what it is to be an individual and what does that look like. My daughter was working on creating sort of a different a video, and the representation of that was kind of limited as far as what the AI was creating, both in image and context. So it was not as representative. So I think for us it's going to be really important to have additional voices, to have additional perspective infused into what's being developed. And that's why it's important for women to be at the table for a lot of the development for these companies, generation of chatbots, even quantum computing. And unfortunately, we're like a very minority of a minority, and it's getting worse instead of getting better, which is, disheartening in a lot of way. But I mean, like you and a few others that are at the fore, it's important to, be at that table, rather than not be at the table at all, and work and strive towards having more representation, better representation and inclusion. And, aligning with our partners and saying it's really important because it creates a better product. I mean, half the population is female, last time I checked. And it's diverse. The world is diverse. So these products have to work for all of us, not just a small segment of us. And I think you were mentioning before, as far as, is this going to make humanity better? I think, as I mentioned prior, it's only if everybody gets access to the same types of resources and gets to use these resources. So we have this additional time and energy to apply somewhere else. And that has to also be representative. So the technology is not kind of clustered with a big, conglomerate corporations, but it benefits all of us.
That is so true. And I think, especially in this month of March, when we are celebrating Women's History Month, it is important that we remember and appreciate, the diversity, equity at workplace and at home. On that topic, as we come to a close, Besa, I want to ask you, who would you want to dedicate the Women's History? I mean, I'm sure there's not one woman, and it's very hard to say one person, but who would you want to dedicate this Women's History Month to? Someone that matters to you, that touched you in any way possible.
I mean, I think for when I think of Women's History Month, I always think of who comes before us, and I want to dedicate it to all of our mothers, even us. So if you're a mother, I think that's like the greatest sacrifice. I mean, I know I do that for my kids and others, and without us, there wouldn't be future generations, number one. And all the sacrifices that a lot of the mothers do and what they do to ensure that their children are happy, safe, and well, and they're creating the future workforce. So that would be my dedication. My
That's so
mother and all the other mothers.
I love that. And I have to tell you that anytime I talk to anyone about dedicating Women's History Month, everyone talks about the mother. And I think it's so special because I think your mom, my mom, or anyone who's listening, the moms take a special place. Somebody was reciting this poem, and in that it said that when you're a child, you are fearless because your mom's around. You know that she's going to take care of you. I think that's the power of a woman. If she's going out and building the world or building the family, the dedication a woman brings to workplace or at home really truly creates an environment for growth, a safe environment for the world. And I strongly believe that when women come to the workplace and they are creating something, they're going to create a legacy, an impact that will be good for the world. And and I have to tell you, Besa, I am so proud of meeting you and meeting the women in Wilda I get to meet and see so many women who are so dedicated in their careers, in their profession, and truly care about building the technology and leaving a mark. And these conversations inspire me. So thank you for being here. Thank you for always inspiring me. I'm a big fan of your Besa, and hope we continue being friends forever and continue making a difference in the world we live in, the workplace we live in, and hopefully we continue, hopefully inspiring people who are listening to this podcast.
Thanks so much, Asha. And as I say, women are great executives. We bring a lot. We create an image of what the society should be and what the future would be. So I'm so thankful to be here and so thankful to spend time with you. So
Always.
happy History Month.
Yes, happy Women's History Month to all of us, all of the viewers who are listening to us. I hope you go back home and celebrate the women in your life, if they are at work or at home, and make sure that you let them know that you appreciate them. Remember, advancing parity and equity, especially in this age when the AI is impacting all our world, begins with a conversation. So make sure you start this conversation. Take a leap into making sure what you build is responsible and ethical, has diversity and diverse voices, and make sure you recognize the minorities in the room. I'm Asha Saxena, urging you to stay engaged, inspired, and committed to making a difference in the data and AI leadership. With that, we come to an end. Happy Women's History Month to all of you. Thank you.